Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to Earwax. I'm Colin, and today we're going to be doing my top 5 albums of 2003. All right, y'all. So this is my top 5 albums of 2003, plus a few honorable mentions. A couple ground rules before we get started. First and foremost, these all have to be studio albums, so no live albums, no compilations, no reissues. And then also, this is just my personal top 5, guys. So, not like objectively the ones that I think were the best albums of the year, just my personal favorites and the ones that meant the most to me. But before we get into the actual list, let's do some honorable mentions. First and foremost is going to be Coheed and Cambria's and Keeping Secrets of Silent Earth 3. This is the second studio album from Coheed and Cambria. Definitely one of my favorites. It's, Good Apollo and Burning Star, part 1 and part 2 are my two favorites. But this album is absolutely incredible. Just barely didn't make the cut. Amazing mix of like prog rock, punk rock, a little bit of post-hardcore, some just metal. Like they were really kind of coming into their own sound on this album. On a similar note is going to be the Mars Volta's D Louse in the Comatorium. This is another incredible album. I didn't get into this one until college, but it is still one of my all-time favorites as far as like modern prog rock goes on the heavier like prog metal side. Definitely an incredible album. And then lastly is going to be Artist in the Ambulance by Thrice, which is not my favorite Thrice album, but it's still an incredible album. It's definitely one of their best, especially from like their early era stuff. It's got a lot of the hits that people know on it and just barely didn't make the cut. So with honorable mentions out of the way, let's get into number 5. So that is going to be Metaphorical Music by Nua Bas. So this is another album I didn't discover until college, but once I did discover it, I listened to it on repeat for like 6 months straight. I mean, there was some other stuff kind of thrown in there, but this was really my first experience with like breakbeat, down-tempo hip-hop, lo-fi, and I was just hooked, especially in college. Anyone that listens to like breakbeat or lo-fi knows it's great study music. And this is just an incredible album. So I think it is one of the most just like beautiful fusion albums for hip hop and like down tempo jazz. Nua Bas's piano work on this album is absolutely incredible. Some of the vocal features, the hip hop features are just like some of the best chill hip hop you'll ever listen to. It is a beautiful album, perfect for a rainy day, a sunny day, a sad day, a happy day. Like it's so good. It just invokes something very deep within me. And I think that had I not discovered this album in college, there's definitely a few months that would have been harder to get through than they were. Some of the standout tracks are going to be Think Different and Blessing It Remix, both featuring Substantial, and then Letter from Yokosuka, which is just an absolutely gorgeous song. I mean, Nua Bas's all of his discography is incredible, or at least the two, albums he released in his time, and then the posthumous album that they released after his untimely death. If you're not familiar, go check him out. He is absolutely incredible, and this is just a mind-blowingly gorgeous, gorgeous album. All right, coming up next in my top 5 of 2003 is going to be Echoes by the Rapture. Now, this is probably one of the most important albums in the dance punk genre. Fairly small, not like overly popular subgenre of both like indie dance and punk. But this album in particular, I think, is like universally regarded as one of the best. So the Rapture, if you're not familiar, is one of the first acts ever signed to DFA Records, which was James Murphy's record label, famously of LCD Sound System. And I believe he actually went on record and said that he probably wouldn't have made LCD Sound System if the Rapture hadn't gone on like hiatus, which at the time they thought was a breakup. This album is incredible. It's raw, it's energetic, it's loud, it's groovy, there's so many layers to it. Luke Jenner, the frontman, is, I think one of the most unique vocalists in this era. It's definitely an acquired taste. I get it if it's not for everybody, but I absolutely loved this album when I first heard it. It's got songs like the main single off it, House of Jealous Lovers, Sister Savior, Heaven, but like front to back, it's an absolutely incredible album. If you're not familiar with it, if you're a fan of bands like Block Party, LCD Sound System, TV on the Radio, Chick Chick Chick, I mean, the list goes on. A lot of those bands kind of, took their sound from the Rapture, and this album in particular really, in my opinion, helped define dance punk as a genre. And it's such a blast, so much fun. I was very lucky to see the Rapture on what was probably one of their last live shows ever, and it was absolutely incredible. Definitely check this album out if you haven't listened to it. It's one of my all-time faves. And at number 3 is going to be I Am the Movie by Motion City Soundtrack. Now, this is one of my favorite pop punk albums of all time. It is such a good blend of like serious, legitimate punk music and then, more fun, catchy pop punk that would become a lot more popular in the years to follow. It's got, some great bangers on it. My favorite Accident, The Future Freaks Me Out, and then my personal favorite, which is Don't Call It a Comeback. I first heard that song on a compilation album that came out around this time called Punk-O-Rama. I believe it was volume 8. A lot of the punk bands that I still love, even like pop punk bands, I discovered off that compilation album. But this album in particular, one of my all-time favorites. I don't think I will ever get tired of listening to it. It is just like... It's such a good example of like brilliant songwriting done in a fun and catchy way. If you haven't seen them live, I know they've been touring, doing some like, anniversary tours recently. Definitely go check them out. They're always a good time. It is, I don't know what else to say about it. Like if you haven't listened to this album and you like pop punk, you like punk, you definitely need to check it out. They are just so fun, and the way that they're able to deal with like really heavy and serious lyrical content while also like keeping the energy and vibe upbeat enough that you're not just completely depressed listening to the entire album. I think they're like one of the best bands to do that, and they showcase it very well on this album. Coming in at number 2 on my top 5 albums from 2003 is going to be Linkin Park's Meteora. Now, I don't think I can overstate how important this album was to me when I was a kid. I had, just discovered Linkin Park a few years prior, and Hybrid Theory was in very heavy rotation. I played the absolute crap out of that CD and was so excited when they, announced this album, and I knew I was going to get more Linkin Park music. And I mean, boy, did it deliver. Like, what a follow-up to one of the best, nu metal albums of all time. I think most people can agree that these two albums for like that era of like popular metal music are pretty much untouched. I do have some friends that are not Linkin Park fans. We definitely get into arguments about this all the time. But then they also present to me that, Chocolate Starfish and the Hot Dog Flavored Water is a better album than Meteora. And that's just a flat out lie. Like, that's just not true. This is, I think the peak of the fusion of hip hop and more like kind of, urban and industrial sounds with just like some heavy metal. I mean, the combination of the rapping and then Chester's like clean singing and like screeching and screaming at some points. It's unmatched. Again, I can't talk highly enough about this album. I love it to death. I listen to it pretty regularly. And obviously, if you're not familiar with it, there's the songs like Somewhere I Belong, Faint, Lying From You, but like the whole album front to back is just absolutely incredible. And, if you haven't listened to it and you like heavy music, I don't know what you're doing, because it's one of the best, metal albums of the 2000s. All right, and my all-time favorite album from 2003 is Sing the Sorrow by AFI, aka A Fire Inside. Now, I understand that AFI gets a lot of hate from people out there that like weren't into like their sound or this genre or this type of music. This album though for me is so important in the development of like my musical tastes. I found this album in a garage sale. I think at like my church parking lot or like when like a community center or something like that. And I bought it and I just listened to it on repeat so much when it first came out. I think it was, you know, probably not too long after it came out. And I don't know, you know, if I would be as into like emo or, you know, horror punk or any sort of like darker music in general if I hadn't discovered this album. It is one of my all-time faves. I don't necessarily think it's like my favorite AFI album. That might be The Art of Drowning, but I do think it's their best. I think it's the one that like best encapsulates like the majority of their sound. Like if no someone had never heard of AFI and I was going to point them to an album to listen to for the first time, it would probably be this one. Just because it's got a lot of like remnants of their punk and horror punk like roots, some of their like heavier, almost like hardcore roots, but then it also is a nice transition into the later part of their career, which is more like, you know, emo, darker alt rock, a little goth, a little post punk. And this album kind of stands in the middle between those two like eras of AFI. Obviously, you know, you've got songs like Girls Not Grey, Bleed Black, which are incredibly popular, and then, you know, the single off this album, Silver and Cold. I remember like the first time I listened to this album, that song was just stuck in my head forever. And no matter what I did, it didn't leave my head. So yeah, I don't know if I would have gotten into like Misfits or My Chemical Romance or, you know, the Cramps even, if it wasn't for like my discovery and love of AFI when I was 11 years old when this album came out. And, you know, say what you want, but Davey Havok is an incredible musician, incredible frontman. I think, you know, his voice has only evolved and gotten better over the years, which is not something I can say for a lot of people. And this album is just the absolute peak of this type of music for me. So, yeah, if you haven't listened to it, I understand if it, you know, if AFI is not your thing, but I feel like everyone should give this album a listen to at least once in their lifetime. All right, guys, thanks so much for watching. That's going to be it for me. Those are my top 5 albums of 2003. Let me know down in the comments what your top 5 albums of 2003 were. And as always, I'll talk to you later. Peace.